This is Musica for the Masses, a podcast about Black and Brown women in music. I'm your host, Andy Garcia Lin, and today I'm sitting down with Seba Ili. She is a cultural educator and musician from Honduras. Her work bridges the worlds of migrant communities and indigenous rights and promotes environmental justice. She is based here in San Antonio. Thank you for being here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So first off, I wanted to ask you, how has life been treating you lately in your creative world?
Thank you for the question. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I lately have been creating a music video for one of my songs called Sunak, which means awaken. And it's in the Lenca language, one of the indigenous languages of Honduras. And I've been working with Greg Harmon from Deceleration News, an environmental local news network here in San Antonio. And I'm really excited about how it's turning out.
Awesome. That sounds great. So tell me a little bit about what inspires your work and what inspires you in general.
That's such a great question. I am inspired by many things, and I think the immediate response would be like my own experience, my own life. And I'm originally from Honduras, and I migrated from there when I was 5. So most of the things that I know about Honduras are through YouTube, which we call YouTube University sometimes. Or like grandfather Google, or even my parents, really. And my parents, they're still janitors, so they work 2 to 3 jobs to make ends meet. And so we didn't have a lot of time to have that natural transmission of cultures the way that we have it back home. And so I started, my spirit just really wanted to know more about who I am, where I come from, why we are the way we are, why this world is the way it is. And so through that, I started creating art around high school and college, just being inspired by everything that I was finding. I remember in elementary school, there was a teacher who told me that all Native people were dead and that it was because they, got sick, and it just sounded like they were really weak, like in that lesson that she taught. And it was this white social studies teacher, and I just remember being so sad and thinking, wow, they look just like me. And fast forward into high school and college, I realized that we are still here, that we're blended with many other cultures, but that we're still here. And so a lot of my inspiration is kind of telling my own story through that experience, and also creating content, creating art for my little cousins. Really, it just started from a personal love for this work that I've been doing, and being able to share it with my immediate family.
Wow, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I also wanted to talk to you a little bit about the influences as far as styles of music. And I know you use indigenous instruments and flutes and things like that. And also you rhyme, you do, your lyrics rhyme like hip hop. And so I want to know a little bit about how you mix those genres and what that means in your music.
Yes, so I grew up in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And we call it the DMV for people who live there. And that area is very, the culture, the popular culture is Black and hip hop. And I didn't have a big Honduran community and Latino community that was very embracing and loving. I did find that within the Black community. And I found a lot of comfort in R&B and hip hop from that area. And me and my friends, honestly, we said the N-word a lot, which is horrible, but that's just what all Latinos talk like in the DMV. If you go there, and a lot of people don't think it's a problem because it's so normal. And there is beef between the black and brown community, but there's also a lot of solidarity, unity that I experienced there. And so the music was a part of my comfort and feeling like I belonged somewhere. And it also set me apart from my family. And it was an interesting mixture between like Spanish, Honduran music, and hip hop, R&B, and so I think with after I came when I was 5 years old, most of my exposure was like very Caribbean, urban type of music that was loud and kind of going against the grain of this homogenized like gringo, or a lot of people wanting to be more white and gringo, and it was kind of like a fu to that status quo in that area, because even though it's very diverse, what I experience is that a lot of people want to appeal to what they call the white gaze or white people, or to stay in good standing with them. And so that meant dressing like them and looking like them. And so I was like, well, what's the opposite of that? And it was like this loud, very sensual and sometimes derogatory, right? Like music. And I really identified with that. So now moving forward, I see that a lot of rap has always been that way, right? Like rap in general, has always been, to speak the truth originally, right? To really say what the community is feeling and going through. And so everything that I've learned with these different types of music, and then later on learning that my family is also very musically inclined. My dad, once I started playing music, he's like, oh yeah, we've had musical groups in our family for generations. And I didn't know that until I started playing. And he's like, yeah, we would tour and we would play, at weddings, at large events. And I didn't know that. And so I started learning more about indigenous instruments just on my own, out of the love for it. And I'd never really had formal training or musical training. So it's really just something that was born from just liking and appreciating native flute and drum, and also being around community here in San Antonio that appreciated these ancestral ways. And I learned to appreciate and love it even more. And so then I really had an opportunity to mold all of my experience with these different types of music and instruments and mold it together. And so my immediate thought was like, how do I mold all this together? How can I bring the flute and really take it into those urban and sensual and Caribbean type of music that's so happy and empowering? Because I think a lot of times, like, our stories as migrants or as indigenous people or as descendants tend to be sad. And for me, I've lived and I live in that reality constantly because of my status. And so I get tired of it, and I've heard this term called, what is it? It's like exploiting the pain of people. I forget what the term is right now, but it's there's a term for that. And so sometimes I feel like I'm doing that to myself, to my family, and to the story of migrants. And I'm like, well, there's so much more. Like, literally, like, in my family, even though we live this very heavy reality of potentially being deported or whatever, like, we live in a lot of happiness and strength. Within our home, we're not like, oh no, we're migrants, oh no, we might be deported. We're like, dang, this food is bomb, like, damn, that song hits right now, we're like singing loud, and there's a lot of strength there. So I think that, yes, there's a lot of pain and sorrow, but there's also so much survival and strength.
No, thank you so much for adding that. That's beautiful. When you're talking about your music and I guess what you were saying about using the pain and all of that, I think that as artists, like, you tend to let out a lot of your pain in your art, and people do that, and that's a strong way to heal, but also to connect, with others and that are going through that and trying to heal. But so I have some questions about at being a musician here in San Antonio, being a woman, and how has your identity and your status here helped or hindered your progress as far as your work and your music and getting your music out there and all of that?
I love that question as well, because there's so many layers to it. So as a woman, I'm very inspired by the women, the musicians and artists here in San Antonio, which there are plenty. But I have learned that, in San Antonio, the majority of musicians are men. And I've realized that most of them have been playing for a long time in their lives, or they studied it, or they were taught by their family members, and I don't have that backing. And so at the beginning I was like, who am I to say I'm a musician? This is just a hobby, because I'm just playing it because I picked it up and played it in my room for a few years, and now I'm out here saying I'm a musician. How could I call myself a musician? These people have been playing forever. But somebody gave me these words recently. They said embodied, like an embodied musician, something like that, where it's like, it's in the bloodline, it's in my path. And so I'm honoring that, and that it doesn't, a lot like my family members, they didn't have teachers. They didn't know how to read or write. They didn't have instruments, so they created their own instruments. They self-taught themselves. They're, in the middle of nowhere, in the mountains, living off the land. And so I'm like, okay, that makes sense, And so then now I with the support of other artists, female artists, I started calling myself a musician. So that in itself, just going through my own process of honoring, my lineage of musicians, that was its own process without involving anyone else really. But then also, I feel like a lot of people categorize me within Native American music, and that's been kind of difficult to navigate, because the Native communities here in San Antonio are severed. There's a lot of history. There's sometimes drama or tension between groups, and it's difficult to go into different spaces if you talk to one group or don't talk to another group. To be invited as a Native musician to do those performances. And then I've had my own experiences as well with certain Native groups, where I've felt like, sometimes there's predatory behavior that isn't called out by elders that are supposed to uphold the safety of those spaces. And so then I don't feel safe to go into those spaces, even though I would like to offer or be in those spaces to learn and to give part of myself through my performance, or what I've been learning. And I've had to really go deep within myself to find the confidence to go out and perform, because a lot of times I am talking about those heavy topics of being a woman preyed upon, or being a migrant, and it's scary because a lot of times we can't tell our own stories because out of fear of being targeted, either by the predators themselves, which may be in the form of men or ICE, right? And so we're not supposed to speak our stories. Other people are supposed to say them for protection, but I'm also tired of that. And so I go into spaces sometimes speaking in third person, because I feel like I have to protect myself and my family. And at the same time, through my name change, I'm like, okay, there's a little bit of protection there, spiritual protection and physical protection in my mind, so that I can share what is really in my heart. which is empowerment, sharing empowerment, and also sharing like what's really going on behind closed doors. Because I think that like what's happening right now in the country with, you know, all this persecution of people of many different groups, you know, a lot of things are coming out into the light. And so we're like horrified by what we're listening to and witnessing, but it's something that is not new.
No, I agree. It is not new, and sadly, you know, but I think as people who, not just as artists, but as people who have like conscious, right? They're conscious of what's going on. It's our job to like let people know, right? And I'm grateful for you for doing that, for being that voice, because there's so many people that don't have the ability to talk about their stories and what's going on with them and how they're dealing with it. If there's anything, I'm so grateful. Thank you so much for doing this. And if there's anything else that you would like to add, I think we're getting to the end of the podcast.
Wow. Well, I'd like to share that I also have started working more with children's songs, and I think that in itself has helped heal a lot of my own pain from my childhood, and being able to also pass on what I've been taught to not just the children in my life, but the children around me or whoever will listen to those songs. And one of those songs talks about children being seeds, and I know that that's a very empowering saying that's going around, right? They tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. But that song comes from Joyous Windrider, who wrote a story about dandelions. And the song goes like this: I'm a little seed, I jump into the ground, I grow and grow and grow. I spread out my arms and I lift up my head. I dance with the wind and flow. I'm a little seed, a little dandelion seed. I dance with the wind and flow.
Thank you. So beautiful. Thank you so much. All right. Well, that's a wrap on today's conversation with Seba Eli. I hope you felt the energy, the honesty, the love that she brings to everything she does. And if you haven't already, make sure to check out her latest projects and follow her on social media. She'll be having performances, collaborations, and also workshops, things of that nature. So thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.